Hey, Robbie Lock with the Harness, and today we're going to be taking a look at the newest addition to the Harness platform, Kustomize. If you're unfamiliar with Kustomize, Kustomize is actually a configuration management solution for Kubernetes, allowing you to make sure you have configuration control across your Kubernetes clusters. So without further ado, let's take a look at the integration of Kustomize. So we have a few bits and pieces that we do have. One thing that we do have, I'm leveraging Amazon EKS with this cluster called Kustomize Me. And so here we have a Kubernetes cluster that we have access to deploy our customized workloads. We're going to be using from the Kustomize project themselves, this example called multi-bases. So we're going to be mapping to multiple environments, showing how that looks like in the Harness platform. So the first thing that we need to do is get a Harness delegate set up. I actually have one set up that is deployed inside the Kubernetes cluster. So if you're unfamiliar with how to do that, take a look at the blog, some of the later steps past the video, or also we have excellent documentation inside of the Harness documentation site. But the first thing we need to do, since we're going to be using some sort of get, we need to actually install get or a get client on our Kubernetes delegate. So to do that, let's go ahead and click delegate profile, and let's just call this install get and call it the gets. And then from the Harness documentation or the blog post documentation, we can actually just paste this in here. So basically running apt-get command. Click submit, and also to go ahead and run that, let's just go ahead and come down to where it says profile, install get, and this will take a few moments to install. The installation on the Kubernetes delegate shouldn't take too long. It actually looks like it just completed. We can view logs, and here we have that get has been installed for us. So that's fantastic. The next step that we want to do is actually wire the Kubernetes cluster up as a deployable area or a cloud provider for the Harness platform. The great thing is, since we're using a Kubernetes delegate here, is that we could actually inherit the details from the Kubernetes delegate. So we don't have to pass too much information. So if you go back to setup, and we go to cloud providers. Let's go ahead and add a cloud provider. We're going to add a Kubernetes cluster. Let's go ahead and name this particular Kubernetes cluster, let's say my EKS. We're going to go ahead and inherit the cluster details from the delegate. Since we have one called Kustomize, we can use that. Go ahead and click test. Looks like the test was successful. Awesome. So we're actually pretty close to what we need now in terms of setup. So go ahead and click submit. Now that my EKS cluster has been added, the next step is actually we need to go ahead and add the example GitHub project into Harness. We'll be using this particular project, the examples multi-bases, as a remote manifest, actually looking more specifically for this customization.yaml. Pretty straightforward to do that. So if we go to setup and we go to connectors and we go to source repo providers, let's go ahead and add one. We'll just call this Kustomize SIG. The URL for the base of the project. Go ahead, you actually need GitHub credentials to grab this. So we'll go ahead and use mine. And then also want to make sure that we have a particular branch name. I'm just going to be using master to click test and click submit. And this actually is wired up for us now. Great, looks like we're getting pretty close. With that out of the way, it looks like we're pretty much wired up for what we need to do. Now it's time to actually make the Harness application and go ahead and get started with the deployment. So if you come back to setup, add application, we'll just call this hello world. And since hello world is getting more complex, so say hello world is getting more complex. The more infrastructure you kind of lay on, the more complicated your hello world example gets, but don't worry, with Harness, it's pretty straightforward. So if we take a look at some of the goals that we have, we actually want to be wiring the multi-base example. And here, if you take a look, multi-base, there's overlays for dev, production, and staging. These are customization terms or customized terms. Let's go ahead and start building out what we need. So the first thing we actually need to do is build out a Harness service. So if you click on services, let's go ahead and add a service and just call this multi-bases. Yeah, let's go ahead and get the description the same. We're going to be doing a Kubernetes deployment type. Click submit. And once the service has been created, this is actually where we're going to be adding the customization stuff. So we're actually going to be linking one of the remote manifests. So if you come to down where it says manifest, a little bit down through the UI window, and we're going to click link remote manifest. We're actually going to be looking for a customization configuration. Here we have our source repo we already set up. The branch name for us will be master. The path to the customization directory, if we take a look at this is actually examples multi-bases. So we're going to be wiring to that. But also, since we want to make sure that we want to go to a specific folder, we can actually leverage a harness environmental variable. This will come out a little bit later during the setup. When we set up the workflow, is that we're giving a workflow name as environment inf.name, so we can pass this to the workflow. Go ahead and click submit. And looks like we're all set up here. Just for demonstration purposes, let's actually go ahead and set up two different environments to deploy to. So we come to Hello World and scroll down to environments. Let's go ahead and add a dev environment and a prod environment. So we'll make a dev environment called dev, so it's non-production. Click submit. Just map the infrastructure definition. So we'll just call this, my dev EKS. Cloud provider type will be Kubernetes Cluster. Deployment type will be Kubernetes deployment. Our cloud provider here will be my EKS. Everything is fine. Use the default namespace for now. Let's just go ahead and make this for production also. So let's go ahead and add an environment. Let's just call this prod. Same description. Prod. Production type. Again, we're trying to map back to our customization environments here. And we'll go ahead and map the infrastructure again. We'll just call this prod EKS. Go back and add the Kubernetes cluster that we have here. Cloud provider, same cluster we're using. Default namespace is fine. Click submit. So with this, actually we can go ahead and make our workflow now. To go ahead and add a workflow, we come back to Hello World and we will add a particular workflow. So let's go ahead and add a workflow. Let's call this Hello Kustomize. Let's just call this my first customized deployment. Workflow type, let's go ahead and just do a very simple rolling deployment environment. For now we can set this for prod to dev. In a more complicated example in our documentation, we can actually pick which environment as a workflow variable, but for now we'll go ahead and just map to dev. Go ahead and grab our service and our info definition for dev EKS. Go ahead and click submit. To add a pick, we can actually add a workflow variable. So if we expand this and actually click on the pencil icon, we can actually add some workflow variables. So we'll just call this environment, and we'll just have a comma separate list, dev and production. We'll just be using these two since we didn't create the staging environment. Click save, and with that, we're actually ready to go ahead and start the deployment. So if we just go ahead and click deploy, and we're going to say else, let's go ahead and go to dev, customize. Let's go ahead and send notifications to me, click submit, and let's take a look at what happens. Our deployment looks like it's going through. Looks like we have some initialization steps that's going to be run right now. And it looks like we were successfully able to complete our execution. Fantastic. Let's make this a little bit smaller so we can see some of the steps that we have here. Our rolling deployment was successful. We're grabbing the get log information. We're also going ahead and running our customize step. If we go to our Kubernetes dashboard, and we should actually have another config map. If you come to the dashboard, looks like we have a brand new config map. And with that, dev my app pod, with that, that was our very first customization or customized example. I hope this was helpful. As time goes on, we're going to be making more and more support for Kubernetes and Kustomize. And until then, stay tuned and cheers, Ravi.